I never expected to hear from her again. Not after the way she marched out on me, her heels clicking on the sidewalk as if punctuating the finality of our marriage. Not after she made it apparent that I wasn't enough, that love, fidelity, and years of shared aspirations meant little if they weren't wrapped in the kind of money and status she sought. And yet, here it was. An invitation. It arrived in a beautiful white envelope, the kind that smelled slightly of luxury, perfume, and entitlement. The gold-embossed writing spelled out my ex-wife's name, Delilah Chambers. Alongside it was another name that made my lips curl into a sneer. Victor Belmont. Belmont, as in the Belmonts, the kind of family that didn't just buy skyscrapers, but entire city blocks. The kind of individuals who turned their noses up at men like myself, men who built their careers with their own two hands instead of inheriting them. I let out a brief chuckle, tossing the invitation onto my desk like it was a joke. She was marrying into one of the most influential families in the city. Good for her. That's what she always wanted, wasn't it? To be admired, envied, perched on a pedestal too high for someone like me to reach. I reached for my glass of whiskey, swirling the amber liquid as I reclined back in my chair. I had moved on. I had built something for myself. I had no reason to care. When my phone rang, at first I almost ignored it. Yet something about the number compelled me to respond. It was a business associate, one I hadn't heard from in months. "Hey, thought you might be interested in something," he said, his voice smooth yet eager. "You hear about the Belmont wedding this weekend?" I frowned. "I might have," he laughed. "Then you should know it's not just a wedding. It's a gathering. Every big figure in the city is going to be there. CEOs, investors, people with actual influence. And you know what else? Deals will be made." I sat up, suddenly more intrigued. "Go on." "There's a contract on the table, one that could change everything for you. But it's a closed-door kind of opportunity. Invite only. And, well, you just so happen to have a golden ticket." I stared at the invitation again. "A wedding?" No, this wasn't just a wedding. It was an opportunity, a chance to step into a world where names mattered more than ideas, where one handshake could be worth more than a lifetime of hard work. And more than that, it was a chance to look Delilah in the eye and remind her exactly who she left behind. For a brief second, I pondered dismissing it. I had better things to do than entertain the ghosts of my past. But then I thought about what it would mean to walk into that event, to stand in the center of all those people who once looked down on me and prove to them that I was someone worth noticing. My smirk widened as I picked up the invitation, running my fingertips over the tiny print. Maybe I wasn't invited out of love, but I was invited regardless. And I had every intention of making my presence unforgettable. I stood up and walked over to my closet, my mind already whirling with limitless possibilities. If Delilah wanted to parade her ideal life in front of me, fine. But I wasn't the same man she left behind. I had constructed something. I had climbed, scraped, and fought my way into a position of authority. And now fate had offered me an opportunity wrapped in gold letters. I wasn't going to waste it. By the time the weekend arrived, I was more than ready. I chose my outfit meticulously, sleek, fitted, costly, but not gaudy. It was the kind of suit that made people take a second look. The kind that spoke of success without the need for words. I ran a hand through my hair, smoothing it down before grabbing my keys. The venue was a large mansion on the outskirts of the city. The kind of area with towering gates and manicured gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. As I drove up, a valet opened my door, waving pleasantly. I handed him the keys, adjusting my cuffs as I strode onto the marble pathway leading to the entrance. Music flowed through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Chandeliers hung from the ceilings, casting a golden glow over the extravagance that only money could buy. I took a long inhale, my lips curling into a delicate smile. I belonged here. As I moved farther into the crowd, eyes turned toward me. Some faces lit up in recognition, others twisted in confusion. And then there were the whispers, the hushed murmurs of astonishment. Yet none of it mattered, because the instant Delilah laid eyes on me, everything else evaporated. For a blink of a second, her wonderfully serene expression broke. Her lips parted slightly, her hold tightening on the champagne flute in her hand. I lifted my glass in a faux toast, watching the way her eyes flickered with something she tried fiercely to suppress. She had moved on, sure. Yet seeing me standing there unbothered, untouched by the life she abandoned me for, that was a hurt money couldn't cure. And just like that, I realized this wasn't just going to be an evening of networking. This was going to be something much more intriguing, because if I had learned anything from my years of fighting, it was this. When people think they've won, they let their guard down. And tonight, Delilah and her entire world were about to find out that I was never the kind of man who stayed down for long. I leaned in slightly to my dance partner, providing a whispered comment that made her chuckle gently. Nothing private, just enough to make Delilah wonder. Victor's jaw tensed, and then I did something that shattered the fragile truce of the night. I freed my partner with a polite nod and took 2 steps forward. Onward, toward Delilah. Toward them. Victor's grip tightened around her waist, his eyes flashing with an unsaid threat. I grinned. Mind if I cut in? I asked easily, my voice calm, confident. Delilah's breath caught. I noticed it, felt it. Victor's grasp on her didn't relax. We're in the middle of a dance. I didn't break eye contact, and a flash of tension passed between us. Unspoken, but there. Victor was hanging on to her. Not just physically, but metaphorically, trying to tell both of us that she was his now. But Delilah, she had other thoughts. She turned to Victor, placing a hand lightly on his chest. It's just one dance. The muscles in his jaw clenched. And then, gently, hesitantly, he let go. I stepped forward, taking her hand in mine. The music continued, but the air surrounding us had altered. Every eye in the room was on us. Every conversation had quieted, just softly. I placed my hands lightly against her waist. Brave move, I murmured. She swallowed. You put me in a bad situation, I chuckled. I just offered you a choice. She caught my stare suddenly, something sinister blazing behind her eyes. And what exactly do you think this indicates? I twirled her effortlessly, pulling her back into step with the rhythm. That you're still the same Delilah I knew, I whispered gently. Still drawn to the fire, even when you know it can burn you. She exhaled sharply. But there was no denying it. There was something electric in the space between us. The ghost of what we once were. The pieces of what we could have been. Victor was watching. I could feel his eyes from across the floor, but I didn't care. Because in this moment, Delilah was mine again. For the duration of this dance, for the length of this song, the past was no longer the past. She was the woman I had loved, and I was the man she had walked away from. As the final notes of the waltz filled the air, I paused our steps, dragging her just a fraction closer before releasing her hand. Her breath was irregular. Her lips barely parted. I leaned in, just enough for only her to hear. You can pretend all you want, I murmured, my voice low and purposeful, but we all know this story isn't done. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because in the hush that followed, in the way her fingers lingered against mine for just a second too long, I had my answer. The music ended. I moved back, and as I walked away, leaving her standing there with her lovely fiancé and her perfect existence, I knew one thing for certain. I had just changed the rules of the game. I didn't look back. Walking away from Delilah after that dance was a deliberate action. Just like everything else I had done tonight, I had nothing to prove to her, not anymore. The way her breath caught, the hesitancy in her footfall, the way Victor's hand had rested possessively over her arm, as if trying to recover her. Those were proof enough. Because despite my controlled exterior, something inside me burned. Maybe it was old wounds rising. Maybe it was the inescapable knowledge that no matter how much time had passed, Delilah and I still had unfinished business. Whatever it was, I pushed it down. I wasn't here for nostalgia, I was here to win. And I had just removed another piece off the board. When I left the dance floor, I felt the eyes of the guests following. Me. Whispers trailed after, speculation boiling beneath polite conversations. I had disturbed the immaculate picture of Delilah's new existence, and in a room full of people who thrived on status, that was something worth talking about. Fine, let them talk. I approached the bar, signaling the bartender for another drink. I needed a moment to recuperate, to divert my focus back to the true purpose I was here for. Power, impact, business. Delilah was a distraction, one I couldn't afford to indulge for much longer. Audacious move, a voice muttered beside me. I turned slightly, catching the gaze of a woman I hadn't seen before. She was striking, tall, poised, the kind of quiet assurance that only comes from knowing exactly who you are. She lifted her glass in a subtle toast. Not many men would challenge Victor Belmont in his own domain. I smirked. I don't see it as a challenge. She lifted a nicely sculpted eyebrow. No? I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. I perceive it as a reminder. Her lips curled slightly, intrigue burning in. Her dark eyes, a reminder of what? That no matter how much riches or power a man has, I said effortlessly, there are some things he still can't purchase. She let out a quiet chuckle, swirling her wine. Intriguing philosophy. So tell me, are you here for business or pleasure? I examined her for a moment, analyzing her intent. She wasn't flirting, not precisely.